Alright, let's get this thing loaded up. Do what it is we came to do. If only you knew, mate. Right. I just want to say, fuck! Oh. I didn't get the text out before I started the stream. I'm gonna end up saying crazy stuff again. Oh my gosh, I'm so cooked. Start vocal stimming in a minute. Better get some people in there before it gets too bad. Let's see, test. I can barely hear the game, but Dark Souls is really loud when you start playing it, so it's better to just keep it turned down. Are we live at 5? What was that then? Rightio. I feel like I've forgotten to do something. Oh yeah, to it. Enjoying decaffeinated coffee in the evening is a luxury. It is also an addiction. So let's give it a minute or two. Nah, I just came on just now. I just came online just now, free. Rumour has it I actually have a physical body that inhabits the physical world. I'm not quite sure about that myself, but I guess time will tell. Finally. One more thing. Let's go do this. Why aren't we born with the memories of God? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's born with memories of anything really. Interesting thought though. That just like low-key sparked a memory for me actually. It made me think of Blade Runner, Memories of Green. Such a great song. Yeah, I mean, there are people who claim they have past lives and they got memories of those past lives, but most of those like stories usually turn out to be fraudulent. But in terms of asking the question, why don't we have memories of God when we're born? It's a very interesting thought actually. Who's to say? You are, in fact, the first one here. What's up, Millennia? Millennia hater. Yeah, it's DS3. Alright, what was I doing before? I lost my ember by the looks of it. Yeah, cold's still kicking my ass. I don't think it's just gonna up and disappear on its own. I have to take some of that cough medicine. And there's that. Why haven't we cured the common cold? Or did I just miss it? So that's a good point, Bliss, right? But when you say genetic memory, what do you mean by that? You're talking about like things that your ancestors experience, or just your body, the configuration for your cells, kind of thing, how your body's gonna be. What do you mean by genetic memory? As far as those like past life stories go, most of them are whacked out nonsense. I think the most popular one was that little boy who claimed to be a World War II fighter pilot, and then it turned out that he'd just been watching this video consistently. It's just like, okay, that's what's made him think that was his past life. What's up, bro? Uh, CJ, what you just said doesn't make any sense. We did create books. Books come about because of humans. So I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you. Oh, I said I was going to do a great sword build this time around. I don't really want to do that. Ooh, that's a lot of records to keep. That's very interesting. Do you know a group of people who actually push for that like genetic memory in terms of the experiences of their ancestors? Is Jewish people. Jewish people like push for the idea that you have like inherited anxiety and stuff like that. It's not actually too far off the mark, but it's interesting from a cultural perspective. So it's like after the wake of the Holocaust, etc. The generations of so again, interestingly enough, right? There's this book called Unholy Alliance, Religion and Atrocities of Our Time, right? And they start speaking about Jewish culture from the guy that wrote the book. Just for clarity, is actually a Jewish professor, right? So he's a professor of Jewish studies. So it's not like some wild external hatred or anything like that. But it's interesting how, for the Jewish community, post-Holocaust was kind of like their cultural awakening, similar to how post-Jim Crow black people's cultural awakening was in Americas. So that's when they started to put together literature and contextualizing their experience, or the experience of their granddads and their dads, right? But this idea of like genetic memory in terms of inherited suffering, psychological suffering of the past from Holocaust, is something actually quite it's quite pushed in the Jewish community, interestingly enough. Now, I'm not saying it's not a truth. I'm not saying it's not a truth at all, but it does have certain connotations to say that just because of your genetics, you inherit the stress or the anxiety or the problems of the things that occurred like socially to the past generation. It's possible, though, don't get me wrong. I see it as a possibility, but I'm not 100% sold on it, to be fair. David, what are you talking about? Of course we created books, man. What are you talking about? We created papyri first, and then scrolls and stuff like that. Of course we did. No, but that critique though aside, right? Not really a critique. It's just an interesting tidbit from that book. There's also a group of people who hold that same point of view from post-colonial and post-slavery. So there's a group of people that hold the view that they have genetically inherited like the suffering, kind of the psychological burden of their ancestors. One might argue though, it's not necessarily the direct inheritance of that experience. It's more like the systematic residue. So you still kind of exist in societies that produce that suffering of your ancestors, if that makes sense. But that's just that's just an opinion. What's up, bro? Is robotism? What's robotism about? I mean, to the people who believe in Mormonism, it makes sense. There's a guy called Jaron who does a stream called Christ Before Jesus, and he always has like a funny critique of Islam being desert Mormonism. So it's like, to them, it makes all the sense in the world to like just pick up this Abrahamic canon and just carry it on. To them, it makes complete sense. But yeah, from an outsider point of view, no, it probably doesn't make any sense. What's up, Devin? Or Davina, sorry. No, it is Devin. What's up, bro? Nah, I just came online now. Second one of the day. It wasn't God, it was extraterrestrial beings. Right, why should I think that? Toe chugger, why don't you explain to me what you think objective morality is? Mr. Golden Egg, no. That's kind of remedial, not gonna lie. Spoil. What, by the way, if you didn't know this, you can use the spawn to heal up, but enemies do respawn. Oh yeah, I do. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of how Souls games work, bro. It's my second playthrough. I'm just I'm cruddy. I'm crap at it, but I do enjoy it. What's up, Sinners? Right. Anyway, so what is the point of this stream? Well, it's to, let's say, entertain. So a large element of the stream is entertainment, hence the game, sometimes the jokes. But a secondary point of the stream is to educate you on some topics that you may not be aware of. And you can say a third thing is just to open up dialogues, to make you leave thinking about things that you may not have thought about before you stumbled upon the stream. So yes, not every idea, not every concept, not every conversation is going to be for everyone, quite obviously. But I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for us to exist in echo chambers. So you should hear the opinions of people who have opposing views on topics. So it's good for you. It's one, to either change your view, or two, to better understand your opponent's argument and point of view. So. Well, I think, so like, put it this way, Toe Chugger, although I might agree with you that murder is wrong, that doesn't make it objectively wrong. That would be my subjective opinion and your subjective opinion. But ironically, the way the word murder is defined, it is obviously a bad thing, okay? I think it's like an unlawful killing, if that's the best way to put it. I might be wrong, can't remember the definition. But the way murder is actually defined as a word is like meant to be unlawful. Whereas, think about it like this, we have militaries whose job it is literally to protect the country by unaliving people. We have police officers, etc., whose job it is to enforce violence on behalf of the state. So, you know, there's clearly a line between, well, legally, socially, there's a line between unaliving somebody and murdering somebody, which is ironic and very silly, because a life is a life, but yeah. Put simply, right, just because I may agree with you about something being wrong, that doesn't make it objectively wrong. Okay? That means we both hold a subjective view that that thing is wrong, but it doesn't make it objectively wrong. In this timeline, yeah, I hear people have that kind of view. I think it's called quantum immortality or something like that. It's not really, to me, it's a bit... What's up, bro? How you doing? Yeah, I do see some wild YouTube comments, but I appreciate that. Devin, I appreciate that. Only reason I haven't actually put people as mods yet is because it's the internet, and I don't really know who is who. You know, you don't want to give like a bad actor access to moderation, and then they start suppressing people who have opposing views to them, or you know, or they start going on a wild power trip kind of thing. You see that on a lot of streams as well. The person that's actually running the stream is one way, but then the mods are another way, and it can be a bit weird sometimes. So that's kind of why I haven't assigned people mod status. So I don't want that. I don't want that turmoil, if that makes sense. Have you ever tried to have a relationship with God or Jesus? So why don't you explain to me what that is? What's up, Stephen? Yeah, I know. I'll be trying to tell people this, but they just don't get it. Kratos is a type of god, a god of war. I don't think Kratos is an actual god of a culture's pantheon, but the way Kratos is like a fictional character worked into historical fiction, if that makes sense. So they work Kratos into fighting all of the Greek pantheon, then they work Kratos into fighting all of the Norse pantheon, and then maybe the Egyptian pantheon in the future. But the gods of the Greek pantheon exist in that culture, the Greek culture. I don't think they really existed as independent entities, but those have a real world representation. But the fact of the matter is, you can essentially make up Kratos to be god of war in the same way the Romans made up Apollo to be god of war. It's no different. It's just a modern version of it. So Kratos, by 2020 standards, or whenever it came out, it was like probably 2000, something like that. Kratos is eligible to be considered a mythical god as well, like a cultural offering of gods, just like Zeus, just like Thor, just like Ra, just like Yahweh. People could pray to Kratos too, like, and working Kratos into Norse pantheon in such a way that he has the son called Loki. Right, that's crazy work, right? But it's all fiction anyway. So who cares? RPO. I think you've got a very limited understanding of what Christianity is, if that's what you think. In fact, one might argue being a Christian has very little to do with gods at all, right? Has more to do with human cultures. But yeah, I mean, shit, why not pray to Kratos? It'd be the same as praying to any other god. At least you get to play as Kratos in a game or something, like, I don't know. Guess he's a little bit more culturally relevant than the old gods, if you will. He's going to respawn. Alright, I remember this dungeon. It actually makes more sense to just run straight through. I have a lot to learn. That's funny. Sounds like you bought the brochure. God damn! Oh Lord. Man said he's met Jesus now. See what I mean? Religions are a safe haven for all kinds of delusions. All kinds of abuses. Yeah, tell them snakes don't talk. But do you know that though? How do you know that though? Sure, donkeys talk. I've seen Shrek. I know donkeys talk because Shrek. I know pieces of wood can turn into snakes because of Prince of Egypt movie. They're all the proofs I need. Right, let's just run through this dungeon. Like, why would they make so many things if they weren't real? Anywho's. Right, so actually reminds me of something. What was that fighting game where there was a skeleton with a sword and a shield in it? Was it Killer Instinct or something? Or Soul Calibur or something? There's just one, there's one like character you can fight as. What are we talking about, Gio? There's no proof, right, that the Jesus of the New Testament ever existed. Now, there might be some argument of him being mixed up with a guy called Yahshua, an actual human, not the Son of God, not a magic man. But the actual evidence of Jesus in the Bible being anything more than a normal man is nil. Yeah. Sorry to say. Most people should know this by now. Okay, there isn't any evidence of a divine birth, like the Holy Spirit injecting Mary with Jesus. There's no evidence of that happened. There's no evidence of the walking on water, the turning water to wine, the healing the sick. There's no evidence of the resurrection. Literally all of those things are unsupported. So anything that, like, in terms of like the magical or the supernatural things that surround Jesus, anything that would make him be considered more than just a normal man, there is no evidence for, unfortunately. I mean, I've got no reason to lie about this, bro. It's just a matter of you going and looking for yourself. Saturated this to death? What do you mean, bro? Is it still affecting our culture and our society? Then it's still important to talk about. Of course I've looked. Would you like? I literally talk to Christians, Muslims, Jews on these streams all the time. Right? Do you think not one of them has thought to tell me, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? Right? They have. Right? And we've looked at them. Sorry to say, as I said, conflating like the mythicist telling of Jesus with the guy called Yahshua ben Joseph is not something that's actual. Right? there's not history for the Jesus character as like Son of God. There's history for the Yahshua character potentially, but not the Jesus character. The Yahshua dude's just a normal guy. Apparently studied under John the Baptist. Apparently had some followers of his own, but he was just a normal human being. Yeah, it's true. I haven't looked at the trees, all the birds, all the bees. It's true. I have no reference to being alive. Some say. I think sincere. So my hypothesis goes like this: there are three main phases to God creation. The first is observational. Humans assign an agency to celestial things, that being things within our solar system, and elemental things, so mixtures of earth, wind, water, and fire, in like forms of nature like hurricanes, storms, earthquakes, tsunamis, etc. The first phase is literally our ancestors assigning agency to those like, striking events. Okay. The second phase is internal generation of concepts. So we start to conceptualize things, things that aren't tangible and observable. Then we deify those things. Then the third phase is anthropomorphizing. That is to give the first set of things and the first phase and the second phase things human nature, human values, human capabilities. Why is it done? For societal cohesion, to start to organize society. Okay. So the first phase is done using what's called hyperactive agency detection device, and that's done for survival purposes. The second phase is using like internal concept generation. There's actually a scientific term for it that I haven't got to mind. But the second phase is done for psychological needs, to start to give certainty where there's uncertainty. And the third phase is done for societal cohesion. Yeah. Creating things like moral arbiters. This isn't an AI loop, bro. Why don't you say something interesting to me? Then maybe I'll say something interesting and unique back to you. But if you just say, the same stuff that everybody says about this topic all the time, it's going to give you the same reply that everybody gets all of the time. So like, what do you want? Like, reality is there is only nature, really. At least as it pertains to our planet and how we exist here. God is not some like separate substance or even its own. Like, there's no proof that gods exist as their own agents. Literally, every shred of knowledge we have about gods comes from the minds of human beings. Sorry to say, it's just what it is. If you think about it, historically, I'll put it this way, historically there's never been a universal concept of what a god is. Different regions, different cultures at different times come up with different configurations of gods. No one's ever gone outside on their native land and discovered the god of another land. For instance, a god like Yahweh, which is what becomes God the Father, becomes part of the triune configuration with Jesus, comes from the Levant, invented by a group of people called the Israelites, essentially, okay, which are modern day Jews. On the Isle of Britain, or Britannia, the original Britons and the Celtics, they produced a god called Brigid, a god of smithing, poetry and healing. The ancient Britons wouldn't have gone out onto their native land, and discovered the god of the Levant of the Israelites. They wouldn't have discovered Ra from the Egyptians. They wouldn't have discovered Zeus from the Greeks. What did they do? They invented their own gods, Brigid. Just like the Greeks invented their own gods, and the Mesopotamians invented their gods, right? So no one discovers gods that other people invent. People invent gods for their personal and cultural needs, and then they transmit those concepts via language or artifact. So we paint about it, we draw about it, we do statues about it, we write books about it, we talk to each other about it. But no one finds gods out in nature, operating as independent agents. That's not what happens. People assign agency to nature via phase one god making. Okay. Sup atheists. I mean, that might be true, but I don't know if that's necessarily a fact, though, to be fair. Because even cavemen, oh my god, I keep doing that. Well, I wouldn't say cavemen per se, right? But really, really ancient members of the hominid or hominidae family were probably, there's no way to know what their internal mind was. We're just looking at artifacts, right? Things like the Lion Man figurine. So it's like 35,000, 40,000 BCE. Right? Things like that would indicate that they were thinking about things that don't necessarily have physical representations too. But we can't be certain whether cavemen thought about gods or not. Right? But based on the hypothesis of hyperactive agency detection device, cavemen likely thought that acts of nature had the mind of their own as well, just like a predator or something. Likely they thought that. But it's hard to say. But yes, the God of the Bible, the cavemen definitely didn't need. Or the God of the Quran, or the God of the Torah, or the Hindu God, or Amaterasu, or Quetzalcoatl, or Shango. No, they didn't need those gods. Just like anyone who didn't live in that country with that God didn't need that God. I'm not your gang. I'm not a brickie and I'm not a criminal. So I'm not your gang. Good. All the better to smell your bullshit with. So, you remember that old story of Red Riding Hood, bro? But what are you talking about, right? You don't even know how one would seek a god. You literally think that's what Christianity is. So you lack an understanding of what a god is in the first place. Just repeating religious propaganda. Seek God, bro. The whole world's been looking for God for thousands of years. No one's found him, bro. What are you talking about? Like, dude, think for a second. Damn it. Literally, like, nearly everyone on the planet. Not everyone, but you know what I mean? Just been exaggerating. But literally everyone's been looking for God for ages. No one's found. Like, and yet you seem to think you met Jesus. It's like you disqualify yourself from a rational conversation. So it's just crazy. I appreciate you for saying that, Seabass, but I'm not really discussing my beliefs in all honesty. I'm discussing facts and information that support a claim. So things that like exist externally to my mind, independent of my views and opinions. So I'm not really discussing my beliefs. Now, religious people do have a tendency to try and frame everything that isn't what they think a belief, because, you know, their primary mode of thinking is beliefs and faiths. So they try to like equivocate other things with beliefs and faith, but they're not. Okay? If you want to start talking about my beliefs, you can have some fun with that. But yeah, nothing I've said has been my beliefs. Yeah, I played Bloodborne, bro. What's up, Lego? My opinion of that conversation, although it's become like a pop psychology or slash pop philosophy conversation, was maths invented or discovered? It's like one of those popular kind of little quandaries. My personal view on that is maths is a language. It's a tool that we devised for describing our physical reality. In fact, we've devised various different types of mathematics that became archaic and stopped getting used. So in terms of the actual language that is mathematics, the figures, the numbers, the formulas, the basic tenets or principles of mathematics, we definitely invented that. Now, whether you could say, like, if you're a Platonist or something, Platonist, you think numbers actually exist as independent things, that's another conversation. That's where the philosophical discussion that you're pointing to happens. But it's evident that humans developed mathematics as a language. It's just evident. And it's happened in various different phases of history, and it's still happening now. In order to make use of higher level calculations, or when you're talking about abstract mathematics, not like basic arithmetic, just addition, multiplication, division, or subtraction. When you're talking about higher level mathematics, abstract things, those things aren't like put it this way, those things are purely psychological and they only get expressed through formula, through words, right? But it's purely a psychological thing. It's not an existing thing. Like, for instance, an example, a contrast example would be like, you walk before the invention of the language of mathematics is invented, before the language of numbers are invented, you walk down the dirt road and you see one apple tree, and on that one apple tree there are 3 apples, right? So those have like inherent numeric values in relation to each other, right? That is a physical representation of maths existing in the real world. Whereas something like calculus or algebra, or, you know, whatever other abstract thing, like, I'm not a mathematician, whatever abstract tool for mathematics doesn't have a physical representation like the one apple, like the one tree and the 3 apples on it, right? So there's levels to it. Now, some people, again, like, that's why it's a philosophical conversation. Some people think that mathematics does exist independently of humans. But again, me personally, I don't fall on that side of the camp, right? I think mathematics is a language that we actually invented to make use of, right? Atheist? Well, that's kind of funny. Bro said Muhammad was a Christian that made Islam. That's going to make some people spit out their chicken. Oh my god. What's up, yo? Why are you telling me about Obama? I think Obama's just waiting for his the perfect moment to expose everything. Obama might have one of those fail-safe plans, like, if I get taken out, share this. I feel like Obama's that type of guy who's like proper down for contingency planning. He's too calm, cool, and collected. Haha. So yeah, I feel like Obama might be like that. But in terms of Obama, like, he's an excellent politician. So yes, Obama would say something like that. Him coming to Christianity as an adult. I think his background was in law, so he knows how to play the game. But at a certain point, like when Obama was actual president, I can't remember, like 2009 upwards, there were so many different conspiracies pouring out of the woodworks about Obama's religious views. Some people like Obama's a Jew, some people like Obama's a Muslim, some people like Obama's from Kenya, Obama's from Hawaii. Like, remember the Obama deception? Like, so in terms of like referencing a politician and their views on a religion, it's kind of a waste of time. Truth be told, I think it's France that is bringing it into effect that politicians ain't going to be allowed to have religious leaning. That is something that we should have had stamped out years ago, bro. Like, that would, if that was in play, right, that politicians weren't allowed to be religious, the whole, like, so much of European history would be different. Like, massive amounts, right? Like, things like Christendom wouldn't have had such a massive impact on how the West actually formed. So yes, I think politicians shouldn't be allowed to be religious, because they speak for so many different voices in their constituency. It's what's called a conflict of interest in some ways. Some people might disagree with that, but I think that's a conflict of interest for the most part. Now, politicians will tell you, yes, I put aside my religious views when making decisions, but I'll give you an excellent example of that being nonsense. For instance, the UK had a prime minister called Tony Blair. Some of you may know about him. He still exists, still publicly active. Prior to getting into politics, so where did I get this information from as a reference? There's a book called Who Runs This Place? There's 2 editions. There's a 2004 edition, there's a later edition that's updated. So in the book Who Runs This Place, this guy's basically walking you through the various different institutions of Britain, right, and who's behind them. Right? So this is the reference point where I got this information from. So prior to Tony Blair actually getting into politics, he was studying law, and he was studying to be in a seminary of some kind, right? He's very religious. Why did Tony Blair decide to go from law and religion to politics? Because of a girl. A girl convinced him to. That being said, right, Tony Blair has always been deeply entrenched in Christianity from a child, right, into his adult years. His religious indoctrinations had massive influence on the type of decisions he made. If you compare the mind of Tony Blair to the mind of Gordon Brown, two opponents in the same party, right, you can see the difference, right? Now, post Tony Blair's tenure, but now think about his actions with sending us to war with America, right? All that kind of stupid shit. There's a bunch of other really bad things he did as well. It's not worth talking about. But if you think about how Tony Blair's represented himself post his actual tenure or his time in office, right? He's actually been at the forefront for expanding Zionism. Right? So his religious leanings, his religious inclinations that were with him before he became a politician, influence his decisions while being a politician. This isn't, like I said, in terms of reference, the book where I got that from is called Who Runs This Place? You can look up for yourself. Now, also, you can look up Tony Blair's work prior to him or post him leaving office as PM. Right, the think tanks that he's been involved with, anyways, who cares about politics? All of this to say, right, who cares what Obama thinks about Christianity? Politicians shouldn't be religious. Okay, that was the point of all of this in the first place, because those religious inclinations or leanings do influence certain types of choices. Another example of the problem of this, okay, is what America is currently dealing with in Iran. Why is America and Israel struggling with the Iran problem uniquely? Because the people who are running Iran have an ideology that is built around martyrdom through Islam. A concept that keeps power in check, like mutually assured destruction, doesn't work so well against a culture that that idealizes martyrdom. Okay, so a religious leaning like that, when deciding your politics, of we can have a decentralized government in terms of you kill this leader, but you knock off the head of the snake, but the body keeps moving. That's cool. That's excellent. But then if you start thinking about, all right, so what's the religious what's the influence of religion on their politics, of how they go to war, how they structure their society? Hence why a lot of people in the Eastern world actually don't want Islam as state religion in terms of it being theocracy, right? But something as simple as that, right, within the culture, within the religion, idealizing the concept of martyrdom makes something like mutually assured destruction off the table for them, because they would gladly say, all right, we'll blow first because we don't mind getting blown up for the cause, right? So stuff like that impacts you politically. So that's another reason why politicians shouldn't be allowed to be religious. So I say again, who gives a shit about what Obama thinks of Christianity? just to be honest, right? Who gives a shit? But yeah, if it could be helped, you wouldn't want you for instance, and it's deeper than just the individual, right? Because Keir Starmer is supposedly supposed to be atheist, supposedly, right? That's what the words on the street is. But Keir Starmer is directly married to a Jewish woman, right? So. Enough said, right, about being disrespectful to the Prime Minister and what the kind of pressures that would put. But in the same way where this is gonna feed into internet conspiracy theory minds, right? But it's worth considering anyway as a larger point of view on strategy. Now, if it was let's say the Zionist state, let's separate Zionism from Judaism, okay? Separate Zionism from Judaism. Let's say if it was a part of the Zionism agenda to embed themselves within all of these various different countries and have them basically groom politicians into success, groom bankers, groom members of the IMF, etc., members of the UN, members of NATO. If there's, for instance, if you think about it like this, so I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just giving you a view, right, of how one might operate strategically, as on a Mossad level. If you have people embedded in all these various societies, they don't have to directly be in power. If you have them embedded with a person, a key person, so their influence and their society will influence that key person, e.g. a Keir Starmer, e.g. a Kemi Badenoch, e.g. a Trump, right? You don't have to be the person. You don't have to be the figurehead yourself. You be the kingmaker. So you can run it from behind the scenes. And it doesn't, and the way you can do this is you never have to be explicit. Like Keir Starmer's wife would never have to explicitly say, do this for Jews. Like, she wouldn't have to do that. You would just be put in a situation socially where the people around you all have the same political inclinations and they all influence you in a particular way. Subtly, psychologically. Right? Oh, this is our friend. I want you to meet da-da-da, right? He runs rah-rah. Oh, nice to meet you, da-da-da, rah-rah, right? Yeah, my wife's a big fan of yours, da-da-da, da-da-da. Down the line. Oh, yeah, do you remember rah-rah we met at that dinner that time? He has this interesting proposition for you, Starmer, right? And that's kind of ways like that, all right? Now, that's a bit too explicit, like in terms of a James Bond movie. But the reality is, Keir Starmer would always have to consider the political blowback of, one, his own decisions religiously, but then the effect on his wife and his children and the society that his wife and children belong to. Okay, that's just a one view. Like I said, that feeds into like internet conspiracy theory minds, which I don't endorse at all. But that being said, the politicians themselves shouldn't be allowed to be religious, but then again, you got to watch what's happening around the politician. A politician, right, cannot actually function as just an individual. They're a part of wholes, right? They're like a part of the party. They represent their constituents, and then they're in their societies, right? A politician can't function on his own as a single cell. He's interconnected with all kinds of people for all kinds of reasons. That being said, every politician that we've ever had has been ushered into that position by a group of people from different walks of life with different agendas. But if one of those agendas overpowers too much, you can see that play out in certain decision making. That's all I'm saying. Right? So it is a good idea to make it so in the future politicians aren't allowed to be religious because of what that might entail. That's just an opinion though. Look at your boy Trump. Did you not see Melania's, what's her name? Is it Melania? Did you see his wife's speech? It's like, it was like watching a James Bond movie. It's like, all right. Like Putin must have been sat there like, I love this, more of this. All right. Macron must have been like, next time I see Trump, I know you ain't talking about my wife. Like, anyways, right, let's just talk about the main subject. He was inventing God. That's that. Right. Did he? I didn't know Plato said that. He would be right. Wait, that's jokes, bro. Like, I think her name was Melina or Melena, something like that. Melania makes a speech. Audience laughs in Macron and Putin. That is funny, man. How am I streaming in India? See what I mean, right? It's like, oh gosh, it's possible, I guess. Maybe it's like AI in my voice into a language that you understand. It's probably not telling you what I'm actually saying though, which is also funny. How does science prove God, bro? Hey, sorry, Lego. Yeah, so they would all be descriptive, Lego. There would be humans making use of tools to describe our physical reality, which is the point of inventing maths in the first place, as a tool to describe our physical reality. So they would put it this way, something like the golden ratio wouldn't have any significance to you if you didn't devise tools to like conceptualize it and make use of it. It wouldn't be of any significance to you. That's what I'm trying to say. If you didn't already have the background information on different important concepts in maths, you wouldn't even, yeah, it wouldn't be meaningful to you. Oh my lord. Yeah, it makes more sense that there's no God because all of these unique variations of humans. Why would God waste time making all these various different humans? truth be told, right, from like a psychoanalysis point of view, there are only like, we want to say maybe about 12 archetypes walking around the earth, and people are just variants and a couple of divergence in between those archetypes. But yeah, most people are like, they're like what used to be called programmable life forms. So you might be thinking about 8 billion people as unique things. Right? Here's an example of how this plays out, right? So you're watching the news and you see a strike has just hit somewhere and it's taken out 100,000 people all in one go. That 100,000 people are faceless, nameless. They're just bodies. They don't have any. There's no personhood to them. They're just a shapeless, faceless mass. Now you hear the same story. A missile was just taken out 2 kids. Now it's more like, oh, rah, they're like 2 humans. Right? That's 2 of us, kind of thing. It's just more personable. This idea of 8 billion people existing, therefore God must have took his time to make 8 billion people, doesn't really make sense from that perspective. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? Maybe I didn't explain that properly. But yeah, like from a biblical point of view as well, you wouldn't really get to 8 billion functional humans. Not saying there are 8 billion functional humans, but 8 billion functional humans from a process of incest in the Garden of Eden. That wouldn't play out. Right? So it would have been a rough journey. rough journey, but it'd be a lot of shit. You guys ever seen the Goonies? Be a lot of that. Hey, you guys, that guy. It'd be a lot of that. No, yeah, so I would agree that each human being is unique. But when I said in terms of archetypes, we're talking psychologically. Right? Those 8 billion people to you are the same as the shapeless mass. They don't have any like personhood to you till you interact with a singular one. But say you interact with like 10 or 12 people over the course of a month, right? You're going to recognize similarities with their speech patterns, with their ideology, with their psychology, how they think, how they move, with other people you've met in the past. They're the types of archetypes I'm talking about. Yes, they may genetically be unique, but psychologically, most people are very similar. We are in the same species after all, the same race. Wolf, you're just talking nonsense, bro. You literally didn't state one fact there. You can think reality is beautiful, that's cool. What's that got to do with anything else? Well, yeah, he kind of like, if God did exist, right, he would just have a program running where humans self-populate, or I think the word's compilate, that's the right word. So he wouldn't actually have to take time to make any individual person. That would actually be a waste of time as a God, if you think about it. If he sets the program running, he could just walk away. It could be like a deist type of God, just leave the desk and let the program play out. So, just as an internal critique, it wouldn't make sense for a God to do that, to make each individual person, and then that feeds into even more problem of evil situations where you start talking about divergence and disabilities, you know, and certain psychological makeups like psychopaths and sociopaths, you know, other predations. That means God took his time to make that person that way, right? Then that has other connotations on your religious views, okay? But I don't mind if you're willing to take that critique as well. But yeah, when I say archetype, I'm not talking about it from like a tarot card astrology type of point of view. I'm talking about it from like a Freud Jungian kind of perspective. I think it was Freud actually. I can't remember, but yeah, from that point of view. Jung. Oh, thanks for correcting me. Appreciate that. Of course, what I'm doing right now is talking. It's literally how my voice functions. Can you believe it? Sounds like that's how words work. Of course. So optimish. That's a fact as well, right? People who make that kind of argument tend to have a very like poor understanding of what ethics and morality is in the first place. So that's why they make those kinds of arguments. Ethics and morality. There's a guy who put it very nicely. Like ethics and morality aren't embedded in anything external to humans. In a nice way of putting it. In another way of putting it is ethics and morality is totally invented by humans. If there were no humans, there'd be no need for ethics and morality. We don't hold animals morally accountable because they don't possess the same cognitive faculties that humans possess. Okay. I mean, I don't think it matters how I think the world was created. If you put it this way, if I had to choose between current like scientific explanatory power and an ancient Mesopotamic myth, I'm going to take the current understanding, even if the current understanding isn't like 100% solid. The current understanding is what's called scientific theory, so it's very well tested, it's rigorously tested, and that holds up a lot better than an ancient myth. But yeah, on a personal level, it makes no difference to how I think the world comes about. Right? It really doesn't. The current understanding isn't true, says somebody who hasn't spent one day studying anything. So how many different fields of study converge in terms of explaining how the universe works, how it comes about, how the planet works, how it comes about, how life works, how it comes about. So many different thousands and thousands of man hours have gone into each individual field of study for you to come along after have read, maybe you've read even one book and say, no, I know it all. Right, it's funny that you don't even know where the creationist story in that one book comes from because you haven't read any other books. So it's funny too. But yeah, I'm sure you got this in the bag. Why don't you explain it to me then, Winnie? Explain it to me in a way that I can understand. I don't take requests, bro. Unless it's something cool. Unless it's something cool, but I don't just start randomly reading out Bible verses because you asked me to. I mean, what difference would it make, right? Put it like this. I love how people, the only way God can talk is through people because it's only people that talk for God. But I love the way people think of God so it's like they infantilize God. It's like, well, if God exists, he's all powerful, all knowing, right? I think he's got me worked out pretty well. He knows what he wants me to do when he wants me to do it. So there's nothing for you to concern yourself about, honestly, right? But since to you, God is just like some incapacitated old man or some decrepit type, then of course, yeah, you should be worried for God on his behalf in terms of what I think and how I laugh about things. But if God does exist, right, I'm pretty sure me and him are cool, right, in terms of how my life played out. I think he might like me. So there's that. Yeah, I don't think, again, right, that's the reason why you're having that thought process in the first place, Winnie, right? It's because humans invented God. So they've provided God with an anthropomorphic psychology, meaning he thinks and acts like humans. He expresses love, anger, rage, etc., even regret. Bro made a bunch of stuff and realized he couldn't control the stuff, then decided to delete all the stuff, right? It's in the villager's text, right? So the reason God has that kind of psychology that mirrors human psychology is because humans made that concept of God that you're referring to. But no, yes, if a God existed, there would be no, we wouldn't really have a good reason to think that it thinks in any similar way to us. We wouldn't have a good reason to think that. So we don't have access to it to know that. So that's what I'm saying, it's glaringly obvious based on how you talk about a God, right, that it comes directly from a human mind. Nah, I just play PS2, PS3, and PS4, bro. And I still haven't even played all the catalog on all of those consoles. So I mean, it's not about believing what I want, and the idea that you're mixing in the concept of free will with your religious views means you don't really get it in the first place. With all due respect, you're using the point of free will, which is like a philosophical idea, in an apologetic sense for your God. So you don't really get it. You don't actually get your own religious framework, because free will is not something that you possess within your own religious framework. So there's that. Oh Lord. Love me some heretics. Love me some apostates, bro. Her name is Millennia. Bro, that woman I watched that speech he gave, bro. I was cracking up. I was like, oh my God. Why did Trump let her go on? Like, what was he thinking? And then there was like what are they called again? There was Novara Media, and it was like, oh yeah, like this is Trump. Trump's campaign. Right, so there was like, Trump was so pressed about the Epstein files that he started a war. Now the war's going so bad, he wants people to talk about the Epstein files again. It was ridiculous, but it was funny. It was like, oh my gosh. This is actually hilarious. No, it was just like, so the way they spun the story was like, oh yeah, so clearly Melania is trying to get out ahead of some kind of information coming out. That's why she did that, but it didn't make sense. Now I understand, right? No, so what actually made me laugh a lot as well was she was like, oh no, I met Trump independently in 1998 or something like that. I was like, you've been in that country that long, you can't even read what it says on your own prepared speech. Like, what the fuck? How is this even allowed, right? It's just like, America's fallen, bro, so low. respectfully, like, as a joke, but how is this even allowed? It doesn't even make sense. Like, America has that kind of culture that props up first ladies as well, right? As some like, since like Nancy Reagan and those kinds of people, they prop them up like as if they're some individual with their like own political movement. So how does Millennia fit into that? Right? It's so goofy. It's like, at least in our country. Now, actually saying that, right? That was the other lady, Blair's wife. Now, she was politically active, but because she was the one who got Blair into politics in the first place. So I think she was the last prime minister's wife that said or did anything significant. I forget her name. But yeah, like, Millennia's not really holding up that tradition of first ladies, is she? Like, she's cooked. Cooked as fuck. Excuse my French, right? I apologise if this is offensive. It's just for entertainment purposes. Butterfinger, you already know I wouldn't do that. But if you ask that same question to someone that's truly a hardcore religious person, yes, they would have no choice but to say if God told them to sacrifice their family, they would. I think it was the story of Job or something like that. They would do it. Yeah, it's like, yes, that's what I was laughing at as well, Devin. It's like, how dare you, bro? Is she tone deaf? Like, do you realize that your husband is Trump, right? He was literally on the island. Like, that was one of the funniest things as well. Like, it's like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. It's like, yeah, the whole like, people completely forgot the point of getting the Epstein files released was so that people could have a way to impeach Trump, and they completely forgot about it for like 6 months. I was like, yeah, like, all of these Epstein files, no mention of Trump. You don't find that suspicious? Like, let's I think it's called it's like poison in the well or muddy in the water. If I throw so much information out at you in a certain way, you won't know what's fact, what's fiction, and where the actual truth in that lies. That was the point of dropping it in that way. It kept you all distracted. It's to the point where you got random theists coming out to me on TikTok and saying, well, Jeffrey Epstein believes God because he eats children, therefore God's real. Like, you're an R-word, with all due respect. The distraction is crazy. But yes, it is laws. But it's a serious matter, but culturally it's funny. It's just like, how is this allowed? But then again, like that's more proof that there are no rules and people are just winging it the whole time. More proof. More proof that it's just literally adults winging it, acting as if they got authority and they know what's going on when they don't. When they don't, they just make it up as they go. Well, obviously you wouldn't be the only one. Again, like it's a put it this way, right? The cultural zeitgeist is important to to at least have a level of understanding of, but you have to be wary to not indulge in the thing when it's in the current media cycle. Although we were having a lull about like Melina's whatever that was, that reading of a card, right? Whatever that was, although we were having a lull about it, it's actually not. It's not a good strategy to actually engage with what's in the media currently. You should always wait for things to pass a significant time of the media cycle to pass, so you can have a more critical analysis of what actually took place from various different perspectives, not the message that's been forced down your throat at that current period. Hence why it was important to not give the Epstein files that much attention when they first dropped, right? It's to watch how the politics is maneuvered around the topic. And then after the time passes, you can see who was who during it. The reason it's done like that, there's a saying that goes, you are not immune to propaganda. So if you're up to date with the current news cycle or what is popular information, you are actually experiencing what's called psychological warfare or warfare by information. Okay, so you as the general public are on the receiving end of propaganda constantly. So if you indulge in what's currently popular, what's currently in the news cycle, then it distracts you from what you should be paying attention to, right? Which is kind of like the iron hand in the velvet glove, or the puppet master behind, or whatever primary issues that matter to your life, your community, where you live. Okay, it moves the goalpost and it moves you along with it so far down the road that you forget what it is you actually set out to achieve and whatever it is you're pursuing. Okay, you become a part of the cycle. You jump from salacious topic to salacious topic to salacious topic. No real substance. But if we can create a public spectacle and then steer the public conversation, we can use the public psyche or the zeitgeist to initiate different political strategies. For instance, if you watch how our country is operating, or how it has operated in the past 2 years around the issues of reform as a political party, you can see the concept, the political tools that were used during the early parts of reforms, like introduction to the country, mirror directly American Southern Mason-Dixon line politics, use of the Confederate flag, right? These are political strategies that were directly mirrored from Americans. Also, there's a lot of influence from American politics over reform politics for another level. But that being said, you could see how talk radio, BBC, LBC, whoever, right, all of these, both right-wing and left-wing media, were steering certain types of conversations at certain periods of time to, like you could say, from an accelerationist point of view, aggressively push certain messages to get the people to move to a certain beat of the drum, to get protests, to get anger, to get etc. And then via this anger and distraction, we can move people towards voting certain things in, or we can distract people from when the House of Lords, the House of Parliament are actually voting on things. Right? So stuff like that is why you got to be careful to not be indulgent in the current media cycle of whatever the issue or the topic of the day is. I'm not telling you to be uninformed, right? I'm telling you to be careful when you hear a certain topic that's currently popular. You always need to have a critical filter and ask yourself, all right, what is being told to me and why is it being told to me? How does it apply to me? What is the relevance? Now, that being said, you take that into account, right? But there's such a thing as subconscious influence, right? So even though you as an individual who doesn't exist as like I forget the word, but like a singular cell, like just an individual cell in society, you're interconnected with so many different people in so many different ways. You will always be subconsciously influenced by the people and the things around you. That's why you're supposed to curate your media diet. You're supposed to curate your friendship groups, how far you're willing to go in conversations with strangers, etc. The type of newspapers you read. These are all important things to have like a conscious awareness of if you can, right? Because even though you may say, all right, I'm not going to read the news, I'm not going to follow the current news cycle, you will still watch the news play out in the psychology of your friends, your family, and your colleagues. How they think, how they start acting, how they start moving. They're being ran by the cultural zeitgeist, which is the current media cycle. Hence why you will see during a period of time in the last 3 or 4 months when we was having conversations about what we're having a conversation about now, gods and stuff, you would see a bunch of people just jump in the chat from nowhere. Oh, Charlie Kirk, this, that, and the other. Jump in the chat from nowhere. Oh, Epstein, this, that, and the other. Jump in the chat from nowhere. Oh, Diddy, this, that, and the other. And practice what's called apophenia, linking all these unconnected things together to make it seem as if they have some cohesive point, but they don't. Right? So, like I said, right, be aware of it. We're having a lull on millennials. Yeah, we're having a lull on her speech. Well, if you could call it a speech, but there's a reason the speech was recorded, there was a reason the speech was presented to us, and there was a reason why we're having this kind of dialogue around the speech in the first place. And those reasons don't necessarily play out in our best intentions, for our best intentions, not necessarily. But you can also inject a little bit of subversion and use these political moments, right, to educate, to inform, to strategize or organize around them, right? Again, so there's an argument that says you don't vote for the people that you like, right? You vote for the people that you can beat. Okay, you vote for the people that you can best psychologically manipulate, not the ones that appeal to your temporary ego or your temporary material wants and stuff. You vote for the one that's easier to control, right? Which goes back to the conversation earlier on about it being a good idea to not have politicians be religious, or having a point of view about who actually is around the politician. Okay, who is their wife, who's their brother, who are their colleagues, what school did they go to? All of those things inform the trajectory of an individual's life, but also the types of decisions they make on the way. What was the point of all of this? I cannot remember. all of that to say, right? Yes, be aware of what's going on around you as much as you can, but try not to get too indulged in it, where you become a drone, right? You're programmed by the current media spin. Now the current trending topics are automatically so important to you when they've never mattered. They don't actually have a material effect on your life. It's someone above you in another hierarchy that needs to make something shake and move, so they need to have you take this opinion. Okay, it's the same thing when you start studying marketing psychology and things like that. So move people through emotions, through their pressure points. Right? That's just what it is. I mean, I don't know. Intelligence, I mean, I don't know what you even mean by intelligence, to be honest. Depends what you're trying to say. Sandy, that's funny, bro. Look, if God is all powerful, all knowing, I don't actually need to tell him anything on Judgment Day. He should be the one telling me stuff. He's like, you know that time when you should have took a left, but you took a right? Yeah, remember that time, right? Yeah, I'm gonna be like, yeah, God, I remember that time. He's gonna be like, my boy, going down there and see old boy Lucifer. It's gonna be that, right? But it's not gonna be, oh man, they gave me the UK elections thing again. I mean, how does this even keep happening? Talk a tiny little bit about politics, and suddenly you get the UK election. Be informed on UK elections. I'm not telling you to vote for anybody. We're just having a conversation. But yeah, it is. You have to have like mental judo, right, and political judo. And I'm not even potentially that good at these things. Probably not at all. Right, but it is important to be able to make use of the zeitgeist. Meaning like what the ideology of the day is, what's happening around you at the time, and use that for your own personal agenda or your group's agenda. You're You're supposed to be able to have a feel for that and see, right now. All right. So earlier on, for an example, right, when I was laughing and I was saying Melania's speech is funny, and I'd be laughing in Macron and Putin, right? There's various layers of context to that as a lol. Okay, why would one be laughing as Putin? Well, who is Melania? Right? Where does she come from? Right? What is the special relationship between Trump and Putin? And what is the historical relationship between America and Russia? Right? Then what is the relationship between Trump and Macron? And his commentary on Macron's wife? Okay? That's the nuance I'm talking about, right? So if you actually wanted to spin that in various different ways, you could use that example of her making a speech for your own agenda to progress it in some format, right? I'm not saying that's what I was doing, but it's just a lol from that perspective. Right? Yeah, that is absolutely true, Apple, right? And at some level, we are all ignorant of politics. And again, I wouldn't even say I've reached any kind of political consciousness yet myself. Right? Something that the fields that I grew up studying in, mostly media and entertainment things, you're actually ushered away from having political ideologies and agendas and knowing certain things, because, you know, it's done to keep you like malleable and manipulatable, if that's the right way to put it. Right? But yeah, that kind of environment is what stunted my kind of growth intellectually, if you will. It's like, okay, that world and that environment, it's not actually okay to be well read. It's not actually okay to be well informed. It's actually a hindrance. You become what's called a problem, or he's problematic, meaning he can kind of see what we're doing. Right? He stopped noticing, you know, like that, but not like that, right? Okay, but yeah, I wouldn't even say I'm really politically aware like that. I just have a 1-2 cents every now and again. What do you mean, QC? But you don't have to eat the info. What do you mean, bro? Do you mean like what's in the current media cycle? Yeah, I would agree, right? But you have to be, again, you have to have like a certain critical filter, and you also have to be like ideologically adverse to some things, you know, not in like a conspiracy theorist way, like get your tinfoil hat, they're programming us kind of thing, but you really need to have like a cultural chip installed in you where you distrust certain voices, where you don't automatically assign authority to something because that's the consensus. You need to have that cultural chip installed in you in some way in your life for you to get to the point where you can be like, actually, I do see what you're saying, but I see what's behind what you're saying. If that makes sense. You know, various different cultures produce people like that for various different reasons, I think, personally. But I do also think it's something that you can learn too, right? Because it's information at the end of the day. So if it's obtainable, then you can learn it. Yeah, I tried to play Daisy. It was really rubbish. It's really rubbish. I still got it actually, but it's really bad. What do you mean, West Side? What do you mean perception equals, or perception is greater than reality? Yeah, green tea. I don't believe you. Now, I'm not saying that didn't happen. Well, from my perspective, that didn't happen, but I don't take people's personal private experiences to be like any fact, or to put it this way, I don't take your personal private experiences as informing me on our shared reality. I don't know you. I can't be sure that your mind actually functions in a way that your anatomy would suggest it functions. So I've no reason to just take your reported experiences as truths. Nah, well, it might take more skill, but I remember getting it back in like the early 2020s, right? I bought it randomly from CEX one day. I brought it home and I waited ages for it to install. Then when it loaded up, it was just like an uncooked game. It's like a half-cooked game. So I just traded it in the next day. Just went back and just traded it in. But then maybe a couple months ago, they gave DayZ out on PlayStation, and I downloaded it and tried to play it again. It was just like lots of long lobby stuff. So I'm just like, I ain't got time for this. Just bailed. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily right. So there's a couple layers to what you're saying, green tea, right? I don't necessarily think your prayers were answered in terms of a God answering it, but there is such a thing as focusing your attention on something, and by you focusing your attention on something, you naturally gravitate towards things that would help you achieve that goal. So if it was always a background intention of yours to get into real estate in some capacity, or maybe you were influenced by someone in your family or close relative or whatever, to work in that world, your subconscious choices would have led you to that choice, to that career. Okay. Now, regardless of you thinking your prayers were answered or not, from a purely psychological / pragmatic point of view, prayer it only works to focus the mind on something, to express your thoughts aloud, or or to vocalize your thoughts internally. So you're directing a specific group of thoughts at something, e.g. a God. That can give you things like psychological benefits, like relief, stress relief, and stuff like that. To talk about a problem is to break the problem down into smaller chunks ultimately. But that being said, right, things like I'll be honest with you, certain times in my life I thought, you know what, somehow when I want something I always get it. Right? But then I actually started to think about it. What is it that makes me get the things I want? Because I try I wouldn't say I try. I'm mostly quite nonchalant about wants and goals, because I know, like, psychologically, through my personal experience of life, disappointments are real, right? Your carers will disappoint you, your friends will disappoint you, your family will disappoint you. Disappointments are real, right? That's something you, as a man, you're just going to have to know and, like, deal with in various different ways. So I try not to be too ridiculous on goals and stuff like that. But there's been times in my life where I thought, anytime I wanted X, I got X. Right? Why is that? And it was like what I was just saying to you. Once I say it as a thought in my mind to do X, I subconsciously move towards making better choices to achieve X. Even when I forgot that I wanted X. Right? There'll be a time when I'll be sat down like, oh wow, yeah, actually, there was a time when I wanted exactly this, and here it is. Right? I don't think that to be anything supernatural. Personally, you might, but I think of that more as a psychological thing, just moving towards a goal or an outcome, and it's quite clearly a possible outcome. Like, if you're, for instance, if your prayer was something like, regrow my limb that was blown off in the war, right? That doesn't seem to be within physical possibilities, so it would have to be a miracle for that prayer to be achieved. But think about how many millions, if not billions, of people are on their deathbeds right now, like, praying to be healed and not getting that prayer. Think about how many mums are about to give birth to premature babies who are going to be in Great Ormond Street for most of their life, and then prayers aren't being answered. So then when you look at that from a real world view, and then you compare that to your, like, respectfully, ridiculous want of being a realtor in real estate compared to somebody's physical existence, right? Whether it's a heart problem or a limb problem, your prayer of wanting to be a realtor and realtor and being in real estate is trivial to that person's prayer or that person's mum's prayer. So from that perspective, it doesn't make sense, does it? Right? So things like that you should at least consider. Okay. Now, yes, it's like, in terms of the world of possibilities, it's very possible for a woman of whatever age to somehow end up being an estate agent. That is very possible. Okay. It wouldn't really take a miraculous divine intervention for that to occur. But now let's say that same woman wants to grow an extra limb, wants to restore, some vital organ of some kind that science can't currently do. Does that prayer still get achieved? Like, does it still get answered in that way? I don't think it would. No, look, I'm talking to you, Millennium, right? From my point of view, there are only three religions. The other things that we like fold, like we like flattened into the category of religion, aren't religions. Religions are imperialistic vehicles, right? That means they're designed to colonize, to capture land and set up their places. Okay, like other faiths, yes, Hinduism does have some like wicked history behind it. So does Buddhism have some wicked history behind it. But in terms of religions, organized institutions that perpetuate theological ideologies, there's only three, and all of them are based on the same God, the Abrahamic faith. So there are only really three religions. But as to the false prophet thing you said, from my point of view, all prophets are false prophets, right? So that's not a thing. All gods are false gods from my point of view. So that's also not a thing. But yeah, as far as a religion goes, there are only really three religions. The others are like what you would call indigenous cultural practices. Yeah, I'm literally. I was literally just talking to someone in that chat. Yeah, so well, we never called it telephone. Britain, like societally, is quite racist. So what we used to call the game of telephone is called Chinese whispers. That's what we used to call it. I know it's bad, but it's just culturally that's what it is. But yeah, it's not called telephone in England. At least when I was growing up, it was called Chinese whispers. But why do you think it might have been called Chinese whispers? I'm not actually looked into that, right? But a little part of a little part of me is saying, yeah, that's definitely like wartime propaganda, just like preparing civilians, like kind of like Well, no, this is a bit more like I don't know. There's a word for it. I was gonna say macabre. That's funny. So, like, for instance, "Ring Around the Rosies" is a song that children sing in Britain, right? But the original "Ring Around the Rosies" has something to do with the Black Plague, I think, if I remember correctly. So that little innocent children's song has a very dark history behind it. In the same way, calling the game of telephone Chinese whispers probably has a dark history behind it, right? That's just the way our society kind of functions. It's a bit effed up. No, see, that idea of favor in the first place. Lego is a same. It's what's called an anthropocentric point of view in the first place. It's like the same. It's the same way of thinking about the rain that forms a puddle and says that this hole in the ground is made perfectly for me. Right, so it must have been made for me. It's that same kind of view, but just from a human's perspective. So there's no good reason to think favor. Again, like so another one of the things that actually pushed me towards like an atheistic view, like actively atheistic view, is a group of people who do what's called they create what's called chosen one content. And there's a video on my YouTube Culture Crack about this. I think I called it the Narc Nazis, right? Chosen one syndrome. Okay. Studying that content and consuming that content at one time is what pushed me to that. Right? They use, I forgot what I was saying here. They use the God talk, religious coded language, as a form of inducing narcissism in people, right? And through that of feeding your ego, you're special, you're chosen, like God is looking out for you. All these various different like weaselly ways they use it, they produce various different forms of delusions in people, right? Delusions of grandeur, like I go through the various forms of delusion in that video, but that kind of chosen one aspect of religion is what you're pointing to in terms of divine favor. It's a narcissistic standpoint, and again, how monotheism functions, it others people and it others cultures. So when you start telling a group of like psychologically, right, Customato, Mike Tyson's boxing trainer, understood this, the idea of suggestive programming, right? If you watch a movie by Jet Li called Unleashed, they break it down very clearly in that movie how you can program someone through suggestions, right? Telling them things, that they start to subconsciously associate with their identity. Right? So who they are and who they're going to become is through you feeding certain little glimpses of narcissism within them. Right? That content that is pulled from religious texts, the chosen one content, is devised to develop that narcissism in people, pull it out, and then the content becomes narcissistic supply for that ideology, for that mind. Right? And through that, that's how you create cults and cult leaders. Right? This is why you've got various factions of Israelite people making chosen one content, various factions of Christian people making chosen one content, various factions of Muslim people making chosen one content, various factions of Jewish people making chosen one content. Right? It's ideologically embedded like that for you to have this view of you having favor, you being chosen, you being special, you being above the others. Right? And through that, drawing out your narcissism, you can go on to dehumanize anyone on your walk, on your way. So you can get what you want out of them, or you can like diminish their humanity in this aspect and that aspect. But religiously, that is embedded in the ideology. That's in there in the first place. Right? That's why it's used in that way. On the other side of that, right, that, like I'm explaining, that's one of the things that pushed me towards atheism. That was like a wake-up call, like, right, this is what's going on. The other part of what pushed me there was watching people like Myron Goldman, Tony Robbins and those people, your Zigzag Zigglars, all those kinds of like prosperity gospel preachers, like your Les Browns, all that kind of world, right? You know, go to this conference, like listen to this, like make you feel good stuff, right? We're literally telling you basic stuff that makes you feel like you know something, right? Things you could do. It's scammers scamming scammers in a pyramid scheme. But where it gets dark is when they start to use it from a biblical perspective, right? I'm not only going to give you this scammers world of Tony Robbins and prosperity gospels, I'm actually going to start embedding stories from the Bible in it, right? Biblical principles in it. And I'm going to have you all gather around, right? Like fucking churches and like make you donate 40k here. Like, yeah, don't worry, I'm flying in a private jet to this charitable event, but you all got to pay me to be here. Like all of these weird psychological fuck ups, right? Excuse my French, right? But things like that is what drove me to say, actually, there's actually something more insidious at play here, right, of how religion works as a software installed in people's mind. And through the software of religion, it creates various exploitable backdoors into the minds of humans and human nature. Okay? Because, again, when I said earlier on, religion is only Abrahamic faiths, right? Because of that, right? That religion, I forgot what I was going to say, it allows you to basically mobilize groups of people under an identity, because the religion itself, it's absorbed into their identity. Right? When you speak of God, it's like you're speaking about a specific part in their body, in their mind. When you speak about Christianity, Islam, Judaism, it's like you're speaking about their race. It's like you're speaking about their mother, their brother, their father, their son, them. It's their identity, right? That's why it's so damn right dangerous. Through that twisting of ideology psychologically and inventing an identity for them, you give them the view of a place to be, and then you govern that place to be. So we can send you out to die in a war. We can send you down the road to extract resources. We can send you to slaughter your neighbor, because your ideology is attached to this identity that we've invented for you. And where do you come every week? So we tell you what to do with this identity. You come to the church, you come to the mosque, you come to the synagogue, you come to the prosperity gospel, you come to the chosen one video, right? You come to the leader, right? That's what you're doing. Okay? Stuff like that is what made me go, you know, these people are, there's something wrong here. Right? Yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't say it as simple as, oh yeah, religion is just a control tool. What's up, goat man? I see you, bro. Yes, it can be used like that. But for me to say it in that way, it reduces the complexity in such a way that it makes it seem negligible. Oh, that's just that. Don't worry about them. They're like no true Scotsman fallacy. They're not real Christians. Right? Again, one of the first things that you'll read in the unholy alliance, atrocity in religion in our time, is that, right? The illusion of innocence through identity. Right? the ideology that Judaism espouses, Christianity espouses, and Islam espouses actually does produce the people who carry out acts, terrorist acts. Right? And then everyone that's within the group identity of Jew, of Christian, of Muslim, go on to say, oh, that person that did that terrorism act isn't a real Christian, isn't a real Jew, isn't a real Muslim. But it's a lie. They've taken the ideology to its logical conclusion. Right? That's what the problem, like, god damn, like, it exactly produces that. Now, you as an individual within that institution may have like a stopcock on your psychology where you're like, like if I turn the tap a little bit too much here, it'll be too much, right, for me, right? So I stop here, right? But the actual framework of the institution or the framework of the religion, it prescribes the ideology. And when the ideology is taken to its logical conclusion, it is seen by any other rational human as terrorism, right? As imperialism, as colonialism, right? As slavery, as feudalism, capitalism, etc., exploitation. When seen by any rational eye, right? That is the logical conclusion of that. What do you mean? I'm the chosen one. This is God's land, and I'm the direct beneficiary of God's will. Right, all this shit is mine then, right? You're mine, he's mine, that's mine, right? Do you get it, right? And if they don't view it from that avaricious point of view, it's like, but I must protect them. I must protect identity. I must protect lands. I must protect resources. Therefore, anything that penetrates this like perimeter, this psychological perimeter, must be destroyed, right? Must be dealt with. Okay, you like watch them, bro. Just scroll through these lives, you'll see, right? They think they'll frame. It'll go from an idea of spiritual warfare to actual warfare. No, now I'm actually like putting bananas in this guy's tailpipe because I want to see him suffer as an individual. Like now I'm actually making sure him and his family can't eat in real life. Now I'm actually making sure I could put a noose around his neck, right, because of his identity, right? These kinds of things is what it produces. So the ideologies, again, like as a reference, the book is called Unholy Alliance, Atrocity and Religion in Our Time. When these terrorism acts happen, or these terrible things happen, the group, which is Judaism, Christianity, Islam, use this plausible deniability or this veneer of innocence for the whole group. But the reality is the ideology that gives you that identity produces the terrorism, because the terrorism is the logical conclusion of the identity of the ideology itself. Okay? People that will carry out those terroristic acts under the religious framework do this with what's called moral licensing. Like I just explained, I need to protect this place, or those guys are the enemy, they're working for the devil, they're progressing this agenda that's anti my agenda, right? So that gives them moral licensing from their view, right? A rational view is like, no, of course you don't have any moral licensing to go and hurt that person because they're different than you or they think different than you. Of course not, right? But within the framework of the institution and the religion, it's permissible, okay? Because God himself would do it. So it's that kind of shit you have to think about. But anyways, how did we get here again? Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. There. That's what it was. Right. So the two things that really pushed me to more of an active atheist point of view, or actually just becoming an atheist in general. The first was watching how the people who produce the air quotation chosen one content manipulate and draw out narcissism, become narcissistic supply, then send people out on various like different kind of destructive missions. Right? And the second was prosperity gospels, your Myron Goldmans, your Tony Robbins, all these people. Okay, how that's used as a manipulation tactic. Those two kind of fields or views is what pushed me to making the first thing I ever made after like starting to realize all this stuff. I made a documentary called Black Atheism or something like that. It's on the Hunt Viral channel. I can't remember what it's called, right? But yeah, I go through various points, right? This is before I actually showed my face on YouTube. I was just a voice, just doing like video essay stuff, okay? But yeah, it's bad. It's actually bad, right? And I get it, right? People are going to be like, well, they're not real Christians. They're not real Muslims. They're not real Jews, right? And then why are they going to say that? That's the no true Scotsman fallacy thing I was just pointing out. They are, right? They're just as real Christian, Muslim, and Jew as you. They're just expressing ideology as logical conclusion in a way that you may not be comfortable with. Right? Right, anyways. Yeah, it's very enlightening. Thank you for that comment. Sorry, I'm trying to look at 3 different chats at the same time. Now, I know that was like a bit of a rant and a ramble to an extent, but you may have, like, on TikTok and that, you just drop in at random points so you don't have the context of the whole conversation. But we've been going through various different subjects, and it's like a conversation being had, right, from the like beginning of the stream, and it entails like political things, religious things, and other commentary. So for you, it might seem like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? There is a context to it. As much as I do jump from thing to thing. Alright, so before I do that, what I want to do is this. Quick! There you go. Off you go. But yeah, the main point is humans invented God, right? That's my position, and I think it's a position that's very supportable with facts and information, which like become what's called evidence. Right? When you make a claim like humans invented God, that's called an explanatory claim. Now, in order to make a claim like that, you need to be able to support it. And how do you support a claim like that? With facts and information. What are the fields or the studies that I pull information from to support that claim? Archaeology, anthropology, and cognitive science. Okay? During this evening stream, I've not even actually gone into the main topic. We've just been having longs about politics and religion. Oh, I've only got one Estus flask. I'm cooked. I think there's a... Oh, no. Yeah, there should be a fire down there. Ooh! Nah, it's too late for me. So, what would be the misinformation that I've spread? What human do you think has access to all facts? Like, literally just walks around possessing all knowledge on all things. Nobody does. So it's going to be things I get wrong. It's going to be things I'm misinformed or uninformed about, just like you. But I try my best not to espouse things that I'm not informed about. I try to. And if I'm gonna, I give the caveat of this is just my opinion. Oh my gosh. Another moral argument, right? Coming from a Christian or a believer is atrocious. Like you've literally just you're given license to just ignore you, right? Once you make a position like, oh, atheists can't have morals. You literally give people license to ignore you by saying something like that because you just clearly don't know what you're talking about. He found his actual blood. See what I mean, right? You're a donut, bro. Actual donut. And not even a good one either. What do you mean, bro? For instance, right now, just like as like a reference point for the crazy thing you just said. Yeah, there's not even any point in me explaining this because it'd just be wasted. So you think they found Jesus' blood? Hooray for you! Congratulations, you played yourself. but okay, right? Fine. Okay. There we go. Who invented me? Now, in terms of who created my body, it'd be my mum and my dad. So, in terms of who created like the mental version of me, how I perceive myself, it'd be a culmination of my own self-generated ideas and thoughts and the input of society. So it'd be basically a case of nature and nurture. Who invented Set as a person? Right? Who invented Set's body is Set's parents. Hopefully that helps. Even though that's probably not what you was asking. Oh, fair play. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what most of you mean when you say reality nowadays, right? I thought the understanding of what reality is something that is not imagined. So it's not something that's just taking place primarily in your mind. But maybe I'm wrong, and that's not what reality is at all. No, you're some sort of sophist. That's why I won't engage with you. I've seen your comments. Yeah, concepts of gods do change over time. They evolve with humans. They have historically. We can trace it in various different types of gods. What are you talking about? I really don't like it when people say God is incomprehensible. How? If God is a concept that we invented, right? Think of God as an empty container, because it's not a tangible or saturated concept. It's purely mind. It's mind dependent. God is an empty container that we stuff full of other concepts. So at no point is God incomprehensible, because God is a concept that we literally generated ourselves and then filled it with other concepts. So for instance, right, a God, you could say, a modern understanding of a God is a 3O God: omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. You do not need to be able to experience omniscience to comprehend what it is, or for it to be comprehensible to you. You don't have to be able to experience omniscience and omnibenevolence, right, to know what it is and what it entails. Alright then, so I'm glad we knocked that one out of the park quickly. Gods are definitely comprehensible because we devise them. Alright. Oh, I'm so dead here. No, right? Not all God concepts are created gods as well, right? Creation is actually an anthropomorphic feature. The only frame of reference you have for anything being created is when humans make stuff that didn't exist before. Right? Some might argue, oh, animals make stuff too. Well, technically animals move things about in their environment, right, to better their habitat. But humans are the only creatures on the planet that create things that did not exist. So when we create a concept like God, and we give it an anthropomorphic feature like being intelligent, having a mind and a creator, it is exactly that. It's us displaying our traits in our creation. That is what it is, and not the other way around. Now, for the sake of conversation, am I saying it's impossible that there's anything akin to a God out there in the universe? No, I'm not saying that. I don't take a hard atheist stance that says there are no gods in terms of that. But when I tell you humans invented gods, we're actually talking about what is known, what can be known. And all knowledge of gods we have come from the minds of humans. Simply put, there is no information about a god you've ever obtained that did not come from a mind of a human or wasn't generated from your mind. Okay? Gods aren't things that exist independently of humans as causal agents in any way, right? Capable of having any meaningful effect on our physical material reality. Gods are absolutely 100% conceptual. Okay? Now, when I said, I gave the caveat, is it possible that there's something akin to a god out there? Yes, but that thing wouldn't be a god. That thing would be an unknown until we have information about it. Okay? But that's the point. Saying the same stuff in different fonts, you have to, right? You never know what people's comprehension skills are like. So sometimes I'll say it slow, sometimes I'll say it fast, sometimes I'll say it complex, sometimes I'll say it simple. Or maybe I'll meet you in the middle of the road and make it simplex. I'm joking. But yes, you have to be, like, one thing I've learned, right? I used to just say things and move on to the next subject and just assume that people have an understanding of what it is I said. And then I realised I have to keep repeating certain things, because not only are there new people coming in, there are people who have heard me say things but not understood exactly what it is I'm saying. And there's another thing that I became aware of recently in this year, is that people hear you, right? They don't hear what you're saying. They hear what they think you're saying. Okay. But all people really need to do, right, which is something I'm working on myself, is to ask for clarity. Right? Ask people when they say things to you to explain better. Not in a sophist type of way, like, oh, what does this mean? What do you mean by this? What does this mean? What does this mean? Like, not in that kind of way. Just like, okay, you expressed an idea, right, that is clearly more nuanced than just the words or the language vocabulary you're using. So can you explain that idea to me in a way I could understand it? Sure, let me give you an analogy. Sure, let me rephrase it, right? That is genuine, right? That's how people have conversation and obtain understanding, okay? But in the world we live in, like in a hyper-consumerized world, we want to have this idea that we can just resolve everything into nice, neat information packages and move on. Yeah, got that concept locked in. Right? Heard him say 3 words, knew exactly what it was going to be. Life isn't actually like that. Right? Communication isn't even like that. On high levels or low levels, there's always nuance. The very fact that language is literally a set of sounds pointing to things should tell you that. Okay. Only reason language has any meaningfulness in the first place is because we agree upon the systems in which we use language. But if you're not up on the information of a particular system, then the conversation is inherently meaningless to you. Okay, so you have to ask for clarity if you don't know. Bro, be an adult, Liberty, bro. You've got to clean up after yourself. You don't just nut on the furniture. Why would you do that? Or on the carpet? You're just making life hard for yourself. Just go do it in the shower. Just do it in the bathroom. Do it in an area where it's going to be easy to clean. Just nasty. Like, what's wrong with you? Anyways, right. That's what I mean, right? There are different levels of conversation happening in the chat at all times. So yes, it is important to speak to people meet people at the level they're at. Sometimes. Sometimes. I'm not saying that I'm at any significantly higher level at all, but I'm the one communicating with everybody here. There isn't historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection, right? That's what I think about that question. Who was it that asked me that? Ronnie, there isn't evidence for that. Truth be told, if there was evidence for that, we wouldn't be having conversations like this. It would have all been resolved like 2,000 odd years ago. There literally isn't evidence of that. No, this is Dark Souls 3. We're going to play Elden Ring in a minute. We're going to be fighting Radagon for a bit. A deist, I mean, that's not a bad position to take. It's not a bad position to take at all. Yes, there is evidence of humans creating God. Right? All the way from Mesopotamia to ancient Greece to ancient Egypt to the Indus Valley to ancient Britannia or the British Isles. There's plenty of evidence of us creating gods. As I said earlier on, when I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. And how do I support that explanatory claim? Through archaeology, artifacts left behind by humans, through anthropology, the study of humans, human lives, human cultures, humans' rituals, etc., societies, and through cognitive science. So when I actually get into the showing and telling portion of the stream, you will see how those pieces of evidence like meet with the claim. I was going to say another word, but I didn't want to be too wordy. Yeah. Right, truth be told, it doesn't matter what your religious text says about anything. Religion and religious texts pertain to human lives, human cultures. Gods could exist and have nothing to do with religions, or gods could not exist and religions still exist, which is likely the case, unfortunately. So your religion doesn't really inform you on the actual existence of a god. Okay? It's just about the culture of the people who produced it. That's all it is. In some ways, Carlos, that's true. Death anxiety is a big feature of being human. So any kind of makeshift certainty we can get around the big unknown, which is death, we'll use it. No, of course, religion, as how we define it, is like a cultural happening surrounding a theological agenda or theological entity, some kind of god, essentially. That's how we define religion. If you actually open up any religious text, the majority of what's happening in the text pertains to human histories and cultures, human beliefs, not the actual evidences of gods existing. It'll be a bunch of claims about gods, but not evidences of gods existing. That's what I mean. Right? But again, if you actually look at Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they are primarily about the cultures that produce those religions. Right? So Abrahamic faiths take place there, like their roots spring out of the Levant region of the world. The stories, the mythologies, all pertain to that region of the world and the happenings around that culture. The story of the Israelites, the Jews, and their ancestors, their meetings with the Canaanites, Amalekites, the other groups, the Egyptians, etc. Right? This is human happenings, written in parable, written in allegory, written in metaphor, sometimes written directly as testimony. These are all things to do with human lives, not evidences of God's existing. Okay, that's what I mean. So, as I said earlier, it wouldn't matter if your religion existed or not in terms of proving a God exists. God could exist and have nothing to do with your religion, or God could not exist and your religion still exist. Right? Just quite simply. I was created by my parents engaging in coitus. It's the old finger in the hole. I can't really speak of with any certainty. I don't know how you were created. I don't even know if you're actually a person, to be honest. You could be an AI, could be a chatbot. But me, I think my parents had coitus, and then my mother carried me for 9 months. And then the doctor came and cut me out of her stomach. And then I was a bane on humanity ever since. I'm joking. Go to the toilet, be right back. How about you come and make me, boy? Hold on. Right, anyways, I forgot to put on my watch. Now it's like after 10. Look at the time. That's a good question. I think all humans came about through naturalistic processes, the same as all forms of life on the planet. So that's plant life and animal life included. That's how I think humans came about. Actually, I've not actually heard about that diamond. I've not heard about what happened. What did happen to the White House? Alright, let's get back down to where we were. Let's try speed run it with our Estus intact. Or not. Good on you, AK10. I love to see Black Atheist too. It means the actual world is healing. It's getting back to where it needs to be. Baby steps, as they say. course, people die for a lie all the time. Ever heard of Branch Davidans? Ever heard of Jonestown? People die for lies all the time, bro. Eagerly too, sometimes. Shit. Aw, thanks, Rachel. I like your personal god too. So cute. Your own personal Jesus. Ain't that cute? Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Oof. Bro, get out of the way! Time. Oh, she says, but my God is real, right? So my implies it belongs to her exclusively. So, yes. So it's her personal God, right? Because it's my. It implies. Yeah, anyways. You get it, you don't get it. It doesn't matter. I'll be here all week. I'm joking. I'll be drinking coffee way too late in the day. Oh wow, the chat is going crazy right now. Who's saying that? Oh, absolutely account. Jesus was definitely an illegitimate child. 100%. Right? Had no claim to the throne at all. Aragon would chuckle. Anyways, super illegitimate. What do you mean don't take it literally? Like, people literally walk around on earth thinking that God listens to them personally, answers their prayers, interacts in their life personally, has created the whole earth for them personally to exist. Why wouldn't I take it literally if someone says my God? I'll take it as literal as they stated it. What kind of God is your God? Is it like a... It's like an Orisha type of god? Is it a Thor? Is it a Zeus? Is it a 3O god? Does it care about other humans? What kind of god is it? Oh! Ah! Ugh! Yeet! I'm dead. This is what it's like talking to a theist. Yahweh, now that's a very specific god. You know, Yahweh started as a storm warrior god, so he started out the same as Thor. He started out as the same as Shango. Do you know why humans made storm gods? Because they assigned agency to elemental things like storms. So an early human mind, an ancestor of ours, would make use of what's called hyperactive agency detection device. And they would assign agency to a storm. What does it mean to assign agency to something? It's basically saying, in the form of anthropomorphizing, saying that the storm has its own mind and is acting on its own behalf. Right? In very layman's terms, the storm is acting on its own agenda. It's alive. That's what our ancestors did, and that's how they made the first types of gods. The fact that you said Yahweh, Rachel, means that you subscribe to one of those ancestral concepts of gods, right? Which is an elemental god. Right? Yahweh is a storm god, warrior god. Warrior, the idea of war, right, is a concept, it's an abstract concept. Right? Also generated by human minds. Okay? That is who Yahweh is, the national god of Israel, a storm god, warrior god. Right? Yahweh doesn't become more than that until he meets up with El Elyon in a henotheistic system that existed in that period of the world, in that region of the world, the Levant. Okay, the Israelites take elements from Elohim, a Canaanite god from the pantheon, right, and mix elements of Elohim with Yahweh, and then Yahweh becomes God the Father, no longer just a national storm warrior god. So we actually know the genealogy of your god and the history behind it. So there's no good reason to think it actually exists, at least as anything more than a concept. So there you go. Yahweh is the way we say it. Some people believe in no way. As a joke, as a parody, I find it quite funny. But yes, Yahweh. You'll have to think about it another time. I wouldn't agree to that. I wouldn't agree to that account for YouTube, right? Explain what you mean by they have an equal chance of being falsified. My opinion is this, right? Atheism is literally the disbelief in God or gods. So by the creation, the moment you create a God concept, you also create the negation of belief in that God concept, which is the basic position of atheism. So that's neither a strong position or a weak position. It's just a standard position, which is disbelief in God or gods. Okay. So I'm not sure what you mean by it when you say it. Like, as I explained to someone the other day, you do not need knowledge of gods in order to not believe in them. So not believing in a god is not, put it this way, not having knowledge of a god is not the same as being agnostic. Being agnostic is to not take a position on something. But you would automatically be atheist to a god that you have no knowledge of, because you cannot believe in it if you don't know anything of it. Right. So the definition of what? Of course, no, it's not atheists that ignore the laws of thermodynamics. It's clearly Christians who do it. You realise that the creationist myth is built on what's called creatio ex nihilo. It's Latin for out of nothing. It's a basic premise that God created everything in the universe from nothing. He created space-time and matter from absolutely nothing. No pre-existing material. It's literally you guys who ignore the laws of thermodynamics to say that God created something. Right? If you've already established with your own mouth that energy or matter cannot be created or destroyed, why would you in the next sentence say that God created anything then? Like you're actually insane. It's like you're incredibly like contradictory. Right, as far as artifacts go in archaeology, most of, all of them, let me be clear, are produced by humans of the past, right? Members of the hominidae family. Maybe more evolved members, maybe less evolved members. For instance, what's called the Lion Man figurine. I could put up on the screen, but I can't really bother with screenshots right now. The Lion Man figurine, do Google of it for yourself. It was discovered in some Germanic mountains and is thought to be between 35,000 to 40,000 BCE. Right? That's when it was produced. And it's also believed to be a spiritual figurine because it's a lion man. Lion men don't exist. Okay. But that being said, you can go from a lion man figurine found in Germanic mountains all the way over to those guys in ancient Mesopotamia and Sumeria, which are carvings in a wall. Right? Humans have been right. I'll explain it in a simpler way, right? Instead of jumping from point to point. All God concepts are primarily generated in human minds. How those concepts are transmitted is through language and through artifacts. So expressing a concept in language, formalized agreed upon language, that, you know, this means this, that means that, or expressing a God concept through some kind of statue, monument, carving, pottery, tapestry, papyri, etc. Like ring, right? Jewelry, etc. Clothing. Okay. They're the only two ways that we transmit concepts of God to each other, right? Through language and through artifacts. Right? So as far as there being artifacts that are actually created by gods, there's no evidence of that. It's like people who had this view that crop circles were invented by aliens. Right? Come to find out, it's just people doing artistic agriculture. It's like there isn't evidence, there isn't artifacts that gods have left behind, or else we'd probably know about them. Now, am I saying it's impossible? No, I'm just saying currently we're speaking about what is known. No, so yes, I'm familiar with what is dubbed as the God particle, but that is not actually a thing. It was actually, if you do a Google, it was called the goddamn particle, but it wasn't allowed to be published like that, so it was shortened to God particle. But it doesn't actually have anything to do with a theological God at all. Go figure, right? Yeah, there's no good reason to think the universe was created in that way. Right? The way you're using the creation of the universe isn't like a semantic type of argumentation. You're implying a creator by using the word creation. Now, if you're just being genuine and just normal vocabulary, like, yes, you could say the universe is created by natural means, right? You could say the planet is created by natural means. But if you're using creation to imply a creator, then there's no good reason to think that. Okay? You're doing what's called a habit of thought. And it's when people try to use examples like the watchmaker's analogy and try to explain reality through a watchmaker's analogy. There are various reasons why a watchmaker's analogy doesn't function as a good analogy for how the world comes about. Some examples of this, right, where the thinking is bad, Marcion or Marcy 1. Right? For a watchmaker's analogy is basically this, for people who don't know, somehow, right, because Christians love this stuff. A watchmaker's analogy is basically you're walking through a forest one day and you find a watch on the floor, right? You have background information for what a watch is, so I don't have to explain to you what a watch is. It's an instrument for telling time, okay? You find the watch on the floor. You don't assume that the watch was produced naturally. You presume the watch has a creator because it doesn't seem to fit in its environment. It's as a basic set of premises of this argument. Fine, we can presume or presuppose that the watch has a creator. Right? Do you know why we can do that with the watchmaker's analogy? Because we have background information on what watches are and who makes watches and how they make watches. Right? So we can presuppose the existence of humans. We can presuppose the existence of machinery and materials. We can presuppose humans organizing machinery and materials to create watches, and we know the background information on how a watch functions. Now, why that analogy doesn't work for explaining the creation of the universe: we cannot presuppose the existence of gods. We do not know the mechanisms or the machineries in which a god may use to create something, okay? So right there, the watchmaker's analogy doesn't work. And then the other problem is, the watch itself is an inanimate object, a piece of machinery put together by humans. The universe is not an inanimate object. Humans, in place of the watch, right, we are sentient, biological, organic beings, not simple mechanisms like a watch. Right? So the watchmaker's analogy fails on various fronts to explain how the universe works or why it might have come about in that way. It's not good. It's a really trash way of thinking. It functions as a really low-level semantic type of argument. You know, a painting needs a painter. A watch needs a watchmaker, right? So a creation needs a creator, right? That's how your simplistic monkey brain is working. But that is not how it works on a universal level, or on the level of the universe or humans. That only makes sense semantically, meaning linguistically with words, right? But it doesn't make sense in reality. Hopefully that helps. Who am I to say? I literally just explained it to you, bro. I literally just explained it to you. Like, it's what's called a habit of thought. You know? So it's a very easy trick to fall into. I mean, if that is your alternative, bacteria and monkeys, right? That's more robust. Even though I don't agree with that statement, that's a more robust explanation than, you know, immaterial spirit decided to speak things into existence one day, right, without having access to air to vibrate. all other kinds of issues, right? Like light coming before suns and all these kinds of strange things. Do you know where all of that comes from? An ancient Mesopotamian creation myth, passed down to Babylonians, passed down to Israelites. That's where that whole creation story actually comes from. If you didn't know, I will put it on the screen for you. Now, bacteria monkeys is a really silly take on evolution, but it's as a joke, it still works better than a creationist myth, you know. Humans coming from bacteria to monkeys is a better explanation than a god doing a golem spell on dirt and then breathing life into it. Right? Do you realize dirt is literally dead matter? Dirt comes about because living things, right, that possess like various elements like carbon and stuff, have died and decomposed. That's what creates dirt, right? So anyways, right, that's what's on the screen is known as the creationist tablet, right? Or the creation of the earth. That's the ancestors of the people in the Levant region of the world, right? Mesopotamia is what's considered modern day Iraq, that kind of area of the world, okay? They're the ancestors of the Jews. I don't know if you're actually sending me gifts, bro, but if you are, I appreciate that. You know these emojis work, but thank you, that's very kind of you. It's not me who's saying the rock is my proof. The rock is literally, it's the foundation for what you find in Genesis. If you speak to any serious theologian, they will tell you you're not supposed to take Genesis in 2026 as a literal account for the creation of the earth. It's supposed to be allegorical, right? It's supposed to be metaphorical, but not literal, okay? Even through like processes like hermeneutics, different people will interpret the story of Genesis in different ways. Some people will be like, yeah, Adam and Eve actually just had coitus and just made kids. They had 3 sons, right? Somehow, right? And then have kids. That's another conversation. But then other people will interpret that as, no, Adam is a tribe of people. Eve is a tribe of people. And then other people will inject some maybe Gnosticism and other views like, no, before Eve, there was Lilith, right? There's all of these weird like interpretations of the Genesis story, but the Genesis story itself is passed down from the Mesopotamians. Also, Noah's Ark passed down from the Mesopotamians. Okay, so these are things you should know since you claim to love your religion so much, right? Would you be interested in actually how it's formed, where it comes from in the first place, or potentially show some kind of interest in a culture in which you're like, you know, appropriated from the Jews, right? Just maybe, perhaps one day you might think, actually, you know, like since the Jews started this, maybe I should actually go study some Jews or study with Jews to see what they actually think. Like, what is their history? Why did they come up with the Torah? You know, maybe or maybe not, right? Like, or maybe not. Let's just be like, yeah, I'll have that. Nice work on that, Jews, right? I'll just wait till 1st century Judea or whatever, just make a new one, right? Just add on some stuff to your book. It's all good. 1500 years later, after your culture made it already, and then Islam comes along 650 years after, like, oh yeah, I'll just make a part 3 to this movie, Return of the King, just like that. So like that. You know, like how Jesus just ascends into heaven at the end of the story, it's all nice and neat, and he goes to heaven, he's like, I might come back, right? Muslims are like, I like that. Let's make Muhammad ascend to heaven, but on a horse, right? It's like, you guys just don't give any homage to where the ideas actually come from originally in the first place. It's just, yes, I'm joking about, but there is serious context into this, like underneath it. Or, anyways, don't take it too seriously, right? No one really cares. No, I haven't, Brent. It says a lot about me, doesn't it? I just like to swing my sword at enemies. Because, like, that's how you play a dark fantasy game, bro. You have to live out the male power fantasy, right? You have to see it through fruition. You have to not be like me and use a sword and a shield, right? You have to imagine yourself to be Guts and go and get the biggest cloud Final Fantasy sword you can possibly get to, like, you know, make some kind of a recompense or, you know, reconciliation to your actual phallus and play the game like this. That's how you do it. You don't do intelligence builds. You don't use magic. Just get a really long sword. Just joking. Anyways, jokes ain't really landing, but who needs to hear them will hear them. Right, so yes. The point of the conversation is humans invented God. If you disagree, feel free to present some information. But when I say something like humans invented God, it's called an explanatory claim, right? And it aims to explain the how and the why, in some instances even the when and the where. I feel it has explanatory success because it achieves that pretty well, pulling from archaeology, anthropology and cognitive science, but it also has predictive power when you will come across God concepts and beliefs in the future without having to posit the existence of any supernatural entities at all. Man, he's heavy rolling, isn't he? not really point in rolling at this point. Look, why is that skeleton so fast? He doesn't even have any tendons, damn it. Like, it doesn't make sense. Anyways. See, that's a dumb question, Marcy one, right? Maybe you thought it was like a gotcha type of question, but that is a silly question. What is behind time isn't what is before time isn't a sensible question. It's not even close. Savelli, right? The way I'm using the word invention is to produce something that didn't exist before. So, using the word before time, before indicates something temporal. So there won't be anything before time. Right? That doesn't make sense. Right? There has to be time. It's like... Anyways, just forget it. I don't know. You know what? Truth be told, Raven, right? It's not all religious people, right? There's a sect of religious people, and again, I can't remember who it was who was saying this. I think it was the Catholic priest who produced the first version of the Big Bang Theory. I think it was him who was arguing this a long time ago. But many of us have said this for like hundreds of years. Religion and science are not in conflict. They are not opposites, right? They're not enemies. Science has been with humans since we got here, right? Or since we gained the capability of making use of our mind or cognitive faculties, right? The process, making a tool, making clothing, creating language, fishing, hunting, starting a fire are all scientific processes. Science has always been with man. Religion and science coexist, right? Religious people add things to science. Science benefits religious people's lives. They're not in conflict. So to the point you're making, Raven, it's the lower brows who think that religion and science are in conflict because they're not actually aware of religion or science. They just regurgitate propaganda. Right? They're programmable life forms. They're drones. Okay. I won't say most, some religious people are very well able to and do reconcile revolution, getting ahead of myself, evolution and Christianity, or evolution and Judaism, evolution and Islam, right? There are people who don't necessarily subscribe to young earth creationism, stuff like that. So they will hold on to they will be able to compartmentalize their beliefs in the supernatural with gods and Jesuses and spirits and ghosts, whilst having a good, robust understanding of science and philosophy and various other things that are important, okay? So it's not every Christian, it's not every Jew, it's not every Muslim, but within these structures and religions, there is a class division where you're afforded certain levels of information based on your intellectual capacity and also your socio-economic background. So the people who exist in the higher part of those scales, like your college educated, your university educated, your air quotation scholars, literally just people that attended school, right? Those people have a more robust understanding of the natural world. So they can't completely turn a blind eye to the sciences, or else they wouldn't be able to excel academically. So those kinds of people are well aware of the reality of things like evolution, right? But they have to be able to reconcile those realities, those concrete realities that are demonstrated with their beliefs, right? So hence why you'll find scientists who are religious, but it's the people underneath them who don't try to understand the world, who think religion and science are in conflict. Their interest is with identity, and their interest of identity is so they can other people to give their self a sense of more meaning. Right? That's where it's coming from. But religion and science aren't in conflict. They never have been. They never will be. Right? It's just they're not even in the same conversation. But shit, as an individual, you can do whatever you want. Well, you can think whatever you want, as long as it don't affect me and mine. It's fine. But to that point, right? Maybe I'll take that back. Let's walk that back, right? Why is it important that we do help people become more science literate, if you will? Because within these cultures, right, which you could say is a colonial hangover, there's a deep entanglement with superstition, right? a lot of religious beliefs are, the foundation of them are superstition, right? How that plays out in a modern world comes in the form of, again, like I said earlier on, first phase of God creation is assigning agency to things, but it's worse in a pathology kind of way, right? So how that plays out in the modern time: child is born with autism, family superstitious, doesn't study the natural world, doesn't have a grasp on sciences or biology or anatomy. So child born with autism, the religious superstitious family say that child has a demon, right? Right, child has neurodivergence, it's a demon, it's a spirit, it's a curse, right? Person on the street having a seizure, they're being possessed by a demon. Woman in a village that knows about chemistry, pick some mint leaves, pick some thyme and some rosemary to help your stomach or to heal a wound. That woman's a witch, right? That is what's playing out. Now, that was literally the actual base mind of people in, let's not say ancient, let's just say a couple centuries ago, across Europe under Christendom, right? Christendom is a system of Christianity and the state being closely interlinked between the 4th century to the 20th century, okay? Under Christendom, the Roman Catholic Church, right, and the Roman Empire actively went across Europe, burning books, flattening people's identity into pagans, creating otherness. So it's Christian. If you're not Christian, you're pagan. Pagan entails an indigenous belief over there of Celts, an indigenous belief over there of Nordics, an indigenous belief over there of Germanics or Anglos, etc. Right? And then that also entails the sciences, the chemistries, your doctors, right, your herb people, your druids. Anybody that isn't Christian is a pagan under that traditional view of Christendom. That Christendom was operated primarily by a group of people called the sacerdotal oligarchy. Oligarchy means power, right, is concentrated amongst a small group of people. Sacerdotal means a group of people that function in religious hierarchies, popes, priests, clergymen, etc. Christendom came about because of that link between religion and the state, right? So those superstitious views, a good way that this is painted for people who like visual representations, go watch an anime called Castlevania and you'll see how that plays out with Dracula's wife, right? That is an actual real world reflection or a depiction of how Christendom had Europe in a chokehold. Now, those superstitious ideologies that used to like really permeate the European psyche have now moved from European psyche through the vehicle of imperialism and colonialism into Asia and Africa, primarily impoverished areas of colonies. So how that plays out in modern day, like I just explained, the healer, the person who studies, is practicing evil because it's scientific. It's not part of the Christian framework. The person that's having a seizure is being possessed by demons, right? There isn't a scientific... I'm not saying this is all people, of course, like I just made a caveat. There are religious people with very great understanding of the sciences. So just so you understand that, we're talking about people on the lower rungs of society within the religious institutions, okay? Not people who are well educated. So how that plays out is the same way it used to play out in Europe. It still does in some places. Europe hasn't completely achieved enlightenment. It's just that it's a patina that we sell, right? But it still does play out in Europe in worse ways than that. But that being said, right, that is what the mind that thinks science and religion are opposed to each other produces. Crazy superstitions that make you anti-science, anti-medicine, and potentially a threat to your own society, to your own well-being, potentially, right? It plays out in things like this. Grandma is about to have an operation. If she don't have the operation, she's going to die. Family says, no, we don't want grandma to have the operation. We're going to pray for her. Grandma doesn't get the operation, doesn't get the dialysis, dies. That's how it plays out, right? A group of a particular version of Christianity says, no, within our group, we don't allow for blood transfusions. Nowadays, that particular group, known as Jehovah's Witness, allow for the people in their community to create blood banks of their own blood in case an emergency arrives. But because of that religious view on a scientific matter, person within that religious framework needs a blood transfusion, can't get the blood transfusion, dies. Right? That's a parent lost to the world forever. Okay, so the minds that think religion and science are in conflict produce very real bad outcomes in the world. But the reality is, for people who are a bit more educated within religious frameworks, they are able to reconcile science and religion perfectly well. They can be doctors, they can be lawyers, they can be politicians, they can be people well educated and practice the sciences, right? Social sciences or hard sciences, okay? But on the lower rung, right, where the psyche, basically where the ideology of the Abrahamic faith permeate primarily is amongst poor people, because it's an imperialistic vehicle. It's a software you install on the hardware to extract resources and labor from people. The point of Christianity, the point of Islam, the point of Judaism is to expand the kingdom of God on earth and in heaven by bringing more people in, expanding the land and gaining the resources which those people possess. That is the point of the religions. That's how they're set up. One might call them Cerberus, right? One might call them Hydra. It's three heads of the same thing. Okay. But yes, the people in the lower hierarchical rungs of religious institutions think that science is opposed to religion, but it's not. And it never was. And it never will be. Okay. Rant over. Okay. Right, anyways. No, we don't, like, so, in terms of the laws of the universe civilly, right, they're called descriptive laws. That's humans making observations and calculations and seeing a similar result consistently. So, like, linguistically, they term it as a law. But it's a description. So that means if there's any deviation in the norms, that now gets added to part of that description. So it gets updated. Prescriptive laws only pertain to humans, human culture, in terms of ethics and law, how one ought to act or ought not act. Those are prescriptive laws, right? Scientific laws is just, law is being used as like a linguistic term. It's not an actual law. It's just an observation, a description, right? A description that is very well studied and formalized, but it is a description. Hence the issue with when we start thinking about things like miracles. A standard definition of a miracle is something that breaks the natural laws but is done through divine intervention. Since the natural laws are descriptive laws, if something that happens that appears to be outside of the natural or the current descriptive laws, which are the natural laws like gravity, like electromagnetism, etc., right, or the light spectrum, that new event, that new occurrence will be studied and added to the description of potentiality or things that occur naturally. The only thing that would be left to demonstrate would be the divine intervention part, right? So you don't think about it like, oh, humans invented the laws of the universe. No, humans described how the universe functions. There's no law, ironically, there is no rule saying that the universe won't change in the next 100 days. There is literally no law. I think it's called the problem of induction. We just assume it will be the same based on the past happenings, but we don't know in any certain way that the universe won't change, that our particular galaxy ain't going to go through a black hole and the laws of physics completely change overnight. We don't know that can't happen. That absolutely could happen. Right? And that we'd no longer live in a life-permitting universe to know about it, but for whatever life form that's left behind after, they would know, right? That those humans used to think the laws of physics were this, but little did they know it was actually this, okay? But yeah, that's we don't invent the laws, right? We just describe. Miracles don't exist by definition, or else they wouldn't be miracles. That's what I'm trying to explain to you, right? And the problem is, why I gave you a standardized definition of a miracle, because individuals have a subjective view on what miracles are. You got people walking around on the planet who say just breathing is a miracle. You got people walking around on the planet who say giving birth is a miracle. You got people walking around on the planet who say I made it home, it's a miracle, right? You got people walking around on the planet I said that's exactly what I wanted for my birthday, it's a miracle, right? So if we use a standardized definition of what a miracle is, it's like it overrides all of those individual subjective views subjective views on what a miracle is. Okay, a standardized definition of a miracle is something that breaks the laws of nature, but it breaks it through divine intervention. It's like a standardized definition, so you don't get these random subjective, like I was driving my car and I fell asleep and I woke up, it was a miracle. So you don't get that kind of stuff entwined in it. Okay, that's the point. But yes, by that definition, anything that does break with the natural laws, because the natural laws are descriptive, would now become a part of that description. This is now possible, right? Kind of like how people describe that Fatima thing. Okay, that's a celestial event, so it's a possibility. So it's accounted for with how the universe would function physically. If that makes sense. You could think your entire existence is a miracle, but it doesn't mean it is. You could think it's a miracle that you even found this stream. It doesn't mean it is. Now that is vicious circularity. What RG said, that is vicious. Alright. Oh my god. Right, why am I still using this giant sword? It was just literally as a joke. I guess we just stick with it for now. Oh, the only question in the stream is change my mind. Like, can you change my mind? That's the only question, really. It's not even really a question. It's like a challenge statement. Changing my mind, but time after time, no one even really attempts to do that. No, I wouldn't say lifting. Well, I guess in a way, right? You wouldn't expect an 80-pound child to be able to lift a ton vehicle, right? Because most vehicles are like a ton, right? But yeah, you're probably using American like measurements around a ton, right? That you could say like culturally that's a miracle, but if you actually think about things that pertain to human anatomy, like the release of things like adrenaline, norepinephrine, all these kinds of chemicals, and how energy is stored in muscles and it springs, right? Things like that are possible. They're not impossible. They happen. Right? People survive these life-threatening incidents, stuff like that. They do happen, or bodies absorb a crazy amount of impact. Sometimes, who is it? I can't remember who it was. It was like one of those guys that do the kind of Houdini thing. It was a circus act, and he used to get cannonballs shot at him directly in his gut. But the way his anatomy was set up uniquely allowed for that, right? And him to be able to continually survive that impact. So it wouldn't necessarily be a miracle, right? It's something happening that's biological or maybe unique to that person. But yeah, not taken away from a child, an 80-pound child actually lifting a ton vehicle to save someone. That's incredible. That would be miraculous culturally. But insofar as it being a divine intervention, remains to be seen, right? It remains to be seen, right? And if God was going to get involved in any of the chain, at any point in that causal chain, why did he wait till the accident happened? Why didn't he just tap the person on the shoulder of the car, say, hey, just don't go that way, like make a wind, get a crosswind or something? Like, why did he decide to get involved in the causal chain at the point where a child had to lift a car? Like, so shit like that should make you think. Right? But hey, I know it was just a hypothetical take anyway. Chris answered. I know it was hypothetical. I don't think that's actually happened that way. It's usually a parent or an adult lifting a car to save a child in most examples, but it's not. I'm not saying it's impossible. It just seems improbable. I'm tired as well. It's like 11 o'clock. Nothing makes sense. Why? What is that word that you use there? Oh, universe. I mean, I don't know if that's actually true, right? again, it's not my job. Let me not say it like that. I'm not 100% informed about, you know, cosmology, astronomy, and all those kinds of things. There's various different fields of science. So I could only ever just point to what the current understanding is, the most popular understanding at that, not even an in-depth understanding. So from a popular point of view, you could say, yeah, there apparently or allegedly there's a beginning to our known local observable universe, but I don't know if that's true or not. How could I independently verify that? I don't think I could, right? But even that doesn't necessarily lead me to any God concepts per se. It's the old uncaused cause problem kind of thing. You could reason to there being some domino that kicks all the dominoes off, but that domino kicking all the other dominoes off doesn't necessarily equal to a biblical type of God, or, you know, like a celestial type of God. Okay, it's not the same thing. It could just be an abstract set of principles that just exist axiomatically, or they just necessarily exist, if that makes sense, right? But I don't know, so I don't make claims about how the universe comes around. The reason we end up in these conversations is because people don't have clear-cut evidences for their God concepts existing. So they point to the existence of all things as evidence. Like they think, oh, if I can squeeze everything as evidence for my God existing, then that raises the probability of God existing. But it doesn't. It doesn't even begin to do that. It's actually like a really giant cope, because you haven't got anything tangible to tie down your God concept to interacting with our physical reality. So you say, oh, actually everything is evidence for God then, which is the same as saying nothing is evidence for God. Big up Naruto, bro. Naruto's it's a legend. Anyways, who's talking about Camelot? What do you know about that? No, I'm kind of tired, dude. Yeah, I've got no reason to think about that. No, that's incorrect, Marcy, right? Just because something is unexplainable to you doesn't mean it's unexplainable in totality. For instance, right, if you're just let's say you're just a normal person, right, and your field of profession is athletics or something, you know a whole lot about the field of athletics. But if I tell you to explain to me how the internet works, how your phone works, how apps work, like UI, all this kind of stuff, right, to you can't explain that to me. There's an old saying that says any technology is indistinguishable. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So to the people who don't have an understanding of the technology, it is akin to magic to them, because they cannot explain how it works, why it works. So something simply being unexplainable to you doesn't make it unexplainable in totality. Something being unexplainable to me doesn't make it unexplainable in totality. It just means I don't understand it at current. That's all there is to that. Now, whether there are things that exist like that are just completely unexplainable across the board, I can't really say with any certainty. What's up, him? Consider dropping me a follow if you enjoy this kind of content. Share it with your friends that enjoy this kind of content. I'm kind of getting tired. It's late in the UK, so it's time to go to bed. I want to have some food too. I do forget people are tuning in on different times. Explains a lot. Act like you've left your country at least once, my cousin. That's sad. Act like you know, bro. What kind of Velma? Alright, I'm clearly just slipping off. Show some decorum, bro. You got a passport or what? Or nah? Nah, just playing, bro. Not everyone is actually having a passport is quite an entitled position to exist in. Shouldn't take it for granted, and should probably make more use of it. That's a message to myself. I'm leaving, G. Explain life. Which kind of life? The movie life or organic matter? Animated organic matter or the movie with Eddie Murphy? So there's these two black guys, right? And they're in what's called bootlegging. Bootlegging is literally running contraband alcohol during the time of Prohibition in America. Because they're black, they get hit with a massive sentence. They basically unfairly charge them with a death sentence or for life in jail. And the rest of the story is about them spending life in jail. So that's how you explain life, right? Next time we can talk about the other type of life. They get hit with a disproportionate sentence based on their social, economic and ethnic background. That's life in a real way. Now, I appreciate everyone for tuning in. I will see you tomorrow maybe. We'll spend the rest of the weekend together. So, enjoy the rest of the weekend wherever it is you are in the world. Where is Omni-Man? Where is he? What do you know, bro? You must have been here before. You must have been here before.